Good afternoon, everyone. It is Wednesday, May 3rd, 2023 at 3 o'clock p.m. That means it is time for Women in Business. It seems like I say this every time I do this show lately, and I apologize for it, but I have no clue what my voice is going to do today. I have some kind of seasonal allergies, congestion from heart issues, cold. I don't know what it is going on, but this is about as good as my voice gets, and it may not stay that way. It's been kind of in and out for the last couple weeks. So the plus side, it is not COVID. I took a test. It is not. So we do know that, but we don't know what otherwise is going on. So I do apologize for that. It's very annoying. Trust me, as annoying as it might be for you, it is so much more annoying for me. So anyway, not what we're here to talk about today, just something I wanted to let you know because, like I said, I have no clue. I have mints to try to keep the coughing down. I have water. I'm going to resort to all of them if I need to. So that's where we are today. In any case, not what we're here to talk about today. What we are here to talk about today is speaking up for yourself. And as I seem to say again, almost every show lately, this is another topic that I have been working on. And the reason that I have been working on it is because I didn't speak up for myself for a very, very long time. I have probably decades of things that happened to me that I never protested. I never told people why they hurt me. I never stood up for myself. I just kind of sucked in the bad treatment and stuffed it all. And for a long while, I stuffed it with food. Later, it was just rationalization, maybe that, oh, well, they're not going to care anyway, or it's not going to make any difference, or it isn't fair to pile on somebody that's already having a rough time, or whatever it was. So I had a lot of reasons why I shouldn't speak up and why I shouldn't advocate for myself. And what I've recently realized is that that's become a habitual pattern now, that I always kind of stuff it instead of saying, you know what, that really bothered me, or that hurt my feelings, or this isn't working out, or I need something different. I just kind of live with it. And that's really not healthy. It's not healthy for me. It's not healthy for my relationships. It's not healthy for happy, productive, content life. So I started really reading and looking and journaling about it and thinking about it. And I realized that I can't possibly be the only one who has this issue. There's got to be others of us. So maybe this was something good to talk about. And I want to separate, first of all, something here. When I'm talking about speaking up for yourself, I'm not talking about it in the sense of how I have talked about it in other shows, which is advocating for yourself as, through voting or speaking up against racial injustice or, sexism or sex abuse or whatever it is. That's all well and good, and you should definitely do all those things. But this is more speaking up in relationships, and they could be romantic relationships, they could be familial relationships, they could be professional relationships, whatever it is. It's just advocating for yourself and what you need. And sometimes that's almost harder than speaking up about an issue that matters to you, like reproductive rights or banned books or whatever it is. Sometimes those are almost easier to talk about because there may be an emotional component to them. And there may be people who will be upset by what you say, but it doesn't feel as personal as when you're advocating for your personal needs, your personal wants, your personal feelings. So That's something that you need to take into account when we have this discussion. That this is more about personal advocacy, I guess we'll call it, in lieu of anything else. So, excuse me, I want to start out today, first of all, with some reasons why you wouldn't advocate for yourself. Why you may have been trained to not advocate for yourself. And I'm sorry if I appear a little distracted, but there are just like updates coming up all over the place on my computer right now, and I have no idea why. It's very weird. So anyway, let's start out with childhood experiences. This is one of the root causes of why I didn't speak up for myself for a really long time. I grew up with parents who didn't listen and didn't really care what I thought, honestly. I grew up with a father who minimized every time I was angry or mad, who would make jokes about it, who would try to tease me out of it, who never took me seriously, ever. And after a while, and the other message that I was getting while all that was happening was also what I felt or wanted or needed wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing was what I could do for everybody else. So I learned to stuff a lot of things because it wasn't going to make any difference. I could have a temper tantrum. I could cry. I could scream. I could stomp around. I could do whatever. I could try to be calm and rational and advocate for my point. Didn't matter. Most of the time, I got told I was melodramatic. I got told I was demanding. I got told that I thought too much about myself. I was selfish, blah, blah, blah. You name it. At some point, I was probably told it. And so my childhood taught me that you can't get anywhere by advocating for yourself, that it's safer to stay under the radar and just kind of absorb everything and push it down and just let it go. Now, I didn't realize how much I had pushed it down until I did an exercise, and I did this actually just really a few days ago, where I sat down and wrote a letter to my parents and told them not even all of the things, just some of the things. And the release of doing that, even though my mom's dead, so she's never going to see it, and my father and I don't have a relationship where he would ever be willing to read and absorb and respond to something like that. So neither of them are ever going to see it or acknowledge it or know about it, but at least I said it. At least I expressed myself, and that really, really helped. Now, your childhood experience could be similar to mine. You could have been physically abused, which means you got hit if you spoke up for yourself. It could have been benign neglect. It could have been people bullying you in class. It could have been teachers bullying you. It could have been any number of things. So there are a lot of childhood experiences that you can have that can kind of teach you that speaking up for yourself is bad or that speaking up for yourself is wrong. And when we're kids, we don't have any other perspective. We don't really have the wherewithal to get any other perspective, honestly. And your parents are the masters of the universe. You believe them. If they tell you you're selfish and it's bad to speak up for yourself, you think it is. If they tell you that people who put their heads above the water are going to get eaten by sharks, which means basically don't make waves and don't make yourself target, then you start believing that. And the more that you believe that, the less that you stand up for yourself and the less that you advocate for yourself. And so before you know it, you're a 54-year-old woman who still is not advocating for herself. So if you had experiences like that, if any of this sounds familiar, then think about it. Do you have a habit of avoiding conflict? I say that all the time. I don't like conflict. I'm very conflict averse. And I am, because conflict was always a bad thing when I was growing up. It was never a positive thing. It never had a positive outcome. But just because that happened when I was young doesn't mean it will happen now. I'm a different person. I have better skills. I have more power, for lack of a better word. than I did when I was a kid. So these are all things that you really need to think about and maybe reframe how you think about advocating for yourself and the idea that every time you stand up for yourself, it's going to end in conflict. It doesn't have to. Just because it did in the experiences that you had doesn't mean that it's going to always. And that's something to remember too. And I think that's really helpful because I tended to be one of those people that always thought if I speak up for myself, it's going to end badly. There's going to be screaming or yelling, or somebody's going to tell me I'm a horrible person. And I didn't want that. So I stuffed a lot of things. And by stuffing, I mean you just don't express it. And in my case, stuffing a lot of things meant I ate a lot. I ate emotionally for years and years and years. When I was a kid, I was plagued by skin rashes, by illnesses, a lot of which by migraines, a lot of which when I got away from my family went away, shockingly. Um, so that was how it all came out. And I think that's the other thing to remember. If you're not advocating for yourself, it is going to come out somehow. It is going to show up somewhere in your life. It could be an eating disorder. It could be blowing up over stuff that's minor at people who have no stake in whatever's happening. It could be, skin rashes or migraines or upset stomach or whatever it is, but those things will come out. So they need to be expressed at some point. The next reason that people don't advocate for themselves, being gaslit. And this is an insidious one because most of the people who practice gaslighting are seemingly nice people, are seemingly people who are saying realistic and sensible things, and basically they're con artists in a way. They can present their crap in such a way that it seems reasonable, especially if you have no other source of reference. And for those who don't know what gaslighting is, first of all, how lucky are you? And second of all, gaslighting is basically making somebody think they're crazy, convincing them that what they think is not true or is not right or is not valid. And I've been gaslit. I was gaslit for years. Most of my childhood and young adulthood, actually, being told that what I wanted didn't matter and that things that were happening that I knew were wrong were okay and right. And why did I have a problem with them? And, I was being told this by people that I was also told that I should trust, by people that I was told loved me and wanted the best for me, which turned out not to be true. But again, when you're in the middle of it, it's really, really hard to have the perspective. And there are times, and this is what also makes it difficult. There are times when you might be wrong, and there are times when you might be overreacting, and there are times when your perception of a situation may not be actually accurate. And so sometimes it's hard to know. But a good rule of thumb is if your gut tells you, if you really feel strongly about something, then you're probably right about it. And if somebody else is, or if you are in a relationship where you're in a pattern of you're continually being told that you're thinking wrong, that you're just being, you're being melodramatic, you're being dramatic, you just like attention, you just want to cause conflict, whatever it is. If this is continually happening to you, and it's usually the same person that's doing it, then you're going to want to look at that relationship and see if that's true. But what happens if you're being gaslit is eventually, if you have no other inputs, or if it's happening from everyone around you, you start thinking, oh, they must be right. I must just be too sensitive. I must be too melodramatic. I must be whatever the pejorative of choice is. And so you end up feeling like you're wrong all the time. And you end up feeling like nobody's going to believe you and your perceptions are wrong and the way you're interpreting the situation is wrong. So you don't bother advocating for yourself because you must be wrong. If you think it, it must be wrong. And gaslighting is a vicious, vicious thing. It's a rotten thing. And people who do it are people to avoid, definitely. And sometimes it's hard to tell when it's gaslighting and when it's genuinely a valid point. I get that. But I don't know, maybe that's a whole show, how to tell when you're being gaslit. But it does happen and it's a hard thing to deal with. It's a hard thing to accept that people who are supposed to care about you and want the best for you are basically feeding you a line of crap. It's tough. Another reason why people don't advocate for themselves, fear of retaliation. And this can be if you were abused as a kid, if you were hit or emotionally abused. I mean, I never got hit, but I got backed into corners and screamed at. And after that happens a couple of times, and it's a 6'2" pretty large guy that's backing you into a corner, you stop advocating for yourself because that's scary. You don't want that to happen. And it could be fear of retaliation from if you advocate a position that people don't like, if you take a stand or exposing something. When I exposed the teacher who molested me, I was threatened. I was threatened by the school board. I was threatened by, that they were going to expose what they thought they were going to expose. I don't know, but I was threatened in a number of ways to try to keep me quiet, which it didn't work. And then they discovered a bunch of other people he'd molested too. And then the ship had sailed. But I understand why people don't report sexual abuse and sexual assault because it's scary and it's hard. And this is something that is a very personal subject and it's very gut-wrenching in and of itself. And then you go to tell people who are supposed to help you, who are supposed to be on your side, and they basically say, we will make this worse for you if you pursue it. That's wrong. And that's sad. And that's, not to mention the people who will question your morals and your ethics and did you sleep around and were you a slut and whatever it was. And, I get that. So fear of retaliation keeps people quiet. It's especially used on women a lot of times. I mean, think about the women who exposed the issues in the gaming community and they were doxxed and their addresses were put online and they got death threats and they had to hide and they had to move and they had to, basically get off social media. And that's wrong because they were exposing something that was actually wrong within their industry. But here's the thing about fear of retaliation that I have learned. Yeah, it is something to fear. There are people out there who will make it their mission in life to make things hard for you, to make things difficult, to punish you for exposing whatever it is that they don't want you to expose. That can happen. Does that mean you should not expose those things? No. Because the minute you give someone else the ability to intimidate you, the minute you allow them to intimidate you into not standing up for yourself, then you lose your voice. And if you don't have your voice, you don't have anything. And that honestly is something it took me a really long time to learn. You only have one voice. You are your best advocate. If you don't advocate for yourself, nobody else is going to. And we want to think that the people we love and the people we care about will protect us and stand up for us. And hopefully they will. If you're lucky, they will. But that's not always a guarantee. And it shouldn't be expected. You shouldn't expect somebody else to fight your battles. If you have an issue, if you have a problem, if you feel strongly about something, it's up to you to deal with it. It's up to you to speak up for yourself. even if you're afraid somebody's going to retaliate. Now, obviously, if you're in an abusive relationship and you fear that someone's going to beat you, then you need to take steps to get out of that, to get protection before you speak up. I mean, don't be stupid. You don't want to put yourself in a life-threatening situation. That's if it can be avoided. But don't let that fear that it could happen stop you from figuring out how to safely speak up for yourself. That's all I'm saying. I would never advocate somebody putting themselves in harm's way. So don't please think I'm doing that, because that's not what I'm doing. I'm just saying, excuse me. Yeah, I figured this was going to happen. I'm just saying, if you're worried about people retaliating, take steps to keep yourself safe and then move forward. Next reason. Oh, this is a big one. Fear of what others think. Fear of what others think ruled my childhood. We were the perfect family in public. And some of that still, it's funny how some of that still lives in me. Like, I'm very careful about how I dress when I know I'm going to be on camera or I know people are going to see me. I'm very careful to be coiffed and look nice and respectable and whatever it's supposed to be, because that's part of that. Fear of what others think was something I grew up with. What are the neighbors going to think? What would they think if they knew that, whatever. I'm not going to go into all the things they could have known, but that ruled me for a really long time. And one of the things that helped me get over that one is, first of all, the realization that people aren't thinking of me or about me or what I'm doing nearly as much as I wanted to think they were. I'm not that exciting. I'm not that important. And honestly, most of us aren't. Most of us, the people we think are watching us and judging us and having opinions about what we do, they're not. They could really give a crap, mostly. So don't worry about it. If you feel strongly about something, if you feel, if you're upset about something, if you feel that something isn't going the way you need it to, say it. Tell the person that needs to be told. Now, in a family relationship and a love relationship, it's a little different story because, yeah, you could genuinely worry what the other person thinks. But honestly, if the other person doesn't take your concerns, your hurt, your anger, whatever it is, seriously, then they're not somebody that you need to be around or involved with anyway. And yes, that goes for love relationships and it goes for family. You don't have to stay involved with people who don't listen to you. You don't have to stay involved with people who get upset with you when you advocate for what you need and want. That's not selfish. That's not wrong. That's not bad. So if you're in relationships where that's happening, where you're getting told that this is a bad thing, that you're a selfish person, that you shouldn't do this, then maybe you need to find new relationships. And I say this as someone who has had to do that. And it's not always fun, and it still isn't always fun, but it is what it is. And I deserve to be treated like my opinions matter. I deserve to be treated like I matter. And so do you. So if you're not telling your boyfriend or your husband or your mother-in-law or your sister or your cousin or whoever it is, or your coworker or your pastor, that you have this issue with them, or you have this issue about what they're doing, or how they're treating you makes you feel bad, or whatever it is, if you're not doing that because you're worried what they're going to think, then you need to look at that relationship and decide if it's a relationship you need to have. Because my feeling is probably not. Just saying. So we've covered some of the major reasons, and I'm sorry I have to keep resorting to the water, but the voice just does not want to cooperate. So we've talked about, as I said, some reasons why people may not advocate for themselves. So, say you've realized that you had some of these reasons, or maybe you had another reason that I didn't mention, but you want to get over this and you want to start speaking up for yourself and you want to start being a better advocate for your own feelings and needs and wants and desires. How does one do that? First thing to do, get used to the fact that it's going to feel odd. Get used to the fact that it's going to feel scary. Get used to the fact that it's going to feel transgressive. Get used to the fact that you're going to be worried about what other people think, that you're going to be worried about retaliation, that you're going to be worried about being wrong or being selfish or whatever it is, and do it anyway. Realize and remember maybe that you were taught this behavior over a period of time. You're not going to get rid of it in a day. You're not going to get rid of it in a week. You may not get rid of it in months or years. It may be a constant struggle for the rest of your life. Does not mean you shouldn't do it. That's not what it means at all. What you need to do is just realize that this may be a complicated issue for you. It may take some time to be comfortable with it if you ever are, and that the value of doing it is worth a little discomfort. And you can also do immersion therapy, so to speak, or, little tiny steps. You can start with something small and advocate for yourself. Go to lunch with somebody, and when they ask what you want, say what you want. Or if you go to lunch with somebody and they say, "Oh, don't you want the tomato soup?" Say, "No, I don't like tomato soup." Or if somebody asks you to a movie, advocate for the movie you want to go see. Start with small stakes stuff. Just get used to speaking up and telling people your preferences. Because for a lot of us that aren't used to advocating for ourselves, that also kind of folds into, I'll go along with whatever you want to do because that's easier. Because I don't want to make you mad and I don't want to upset anybody and I don't want to cause any problems. So I'm just going to go along with what you want to do. So saying, "No, I don't like that place," or "No, I'm not really a fan of that restaurant," or "No, I don't really like artichokes," or whatever it is, can be a small way to advocate for something for yourself. And it's pretty low stakes. I mean, if somebody gets annoyed with you because you don't like artichokes, or they absolutely insist that we must go to this one restaurant and this one restaurant only, and they will never speak to you again if you don't go to that restaurant, then you have way bigger problems than the fact that you don't want to go to that restaurant. And yeah, for some people it is about control, but again, way bigger problem. If you say no and they get all incensed about whatever it is, then you need to look at that relationship, because it's not about you advocating for yourself. It's about you challenging their control. And there are people who don't like that. Shocker. So basically, start small. Advocate for yourself in small ways and get used to the fact that you may always have some nausea in the pit of your stomach, that you may always feel tense when you do this, that you may always want to cry, whatever it is. Because if you've had years and years of being told that advocating for yourself was wrong, or being punished when you advocated for yourself, or having people retaliate when you advocated for yourself, or being judged when you advocate for yourself, it's going to take a while to feel comfortable with it. So be okay with not being comfortable with it, because that's the only way you're going to get through the discomfort to the other side. Next thing, don't justify or over-explain. One of the things that people who are new to advocating for themselves will do is they'll try to make their case. They want to make everybody feel okay with the fact that they're standing up for themselves. So they'll give 49 reasons why what they're doing is okay. Or they'll go into a long rambling explanation, or they'll just basically word vomit on someone until they get the reaction that they're hoping they'll get. The problem with this is it makes you look, I hate the word weak, but that's really what it is. You don't have to justify, you don't have to explain. There's a phrase that I see around every once in a while: no is a complete sentence. That's exactly true. If you don't want to go somewhere, you can say no. If you don't like that food, you can say no, I don't want to eat that. If you don't enjoy those people, you can say no, I don't want to hang out with them. If you don't want to have sex, if you don't want to, whatever it is, you can say no. And you don't have to follow that up with anything else. Now, in some cases, you might, but you don't have to. And that was one of the things that was really huge for me, I have to say, to learn that I don't have to explain it. I don't owe anybody an explanation. I can feel what I want to feel, and it's my feelings, and I don't have to justify it. I don't have to make you be okay with it. I can just say, I don't want to do this. This isn't fair. This is making me uncomfortable, whatever it is. And just that's it. I don't have to do anything else. And I think the over explaining comes again from if you've been abused, if you've been gaslit, if you've been retaliated against. There's this urge to, I'm going to make it all right. I'm going to make it okay. I'm going to make everything good, and everybody's going to love me, and it's all going to be nice, and there's not going to be any conflict, and nobody's going to be mad. And none of that is necessarily true. And over explaining or justifying it isn't going to make it any less true. So, or any more true, I guess would be what I should say. So, just don't. No is a complete sentence. I don't want to is a complete sentence. I don't like that is a complete sentence. You don't have to explain any further, and you don't owe anybody else an explanation. Now, yeah, there are, if you're in a romantic relationship, you're maybe going to explain more than you would if it's somebody who asks you, do you want a latte? But you don't have to. You have the right to what you feel. You have the right to how you think. You have the right to say no. And especially for women, the right to say no is something that we really need to cling to and practice, because there are people who don't believe we should have that right. So don't justify, don't over explain. Now, note that says over explain, not never explain. That, I think, is taking things a little too far. There are times when a little bit of explanation might be in order, but over explaining to the point where you've told everybody about your third grade teacher and how there was once this class rabbit and blah, 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 blah. And it's like way more sharing than anybody needs. So think about that, basically. Next thing, be prepared for a negative response. It's going to happen, especially if you're dealing with people who have been gaslighting you, especially if you've been dealing with people who have been used to controlling you, especially if you've been dealing with people who just didn't take you seriously or treated you as though you were dramatic or whatever it was. They may not react positively. Our dream, I think, is to have everybody go, okay, that's great, fine, whatever you want, that's good. Or alternatively, if it's been somebody who's abused you or who has treated you poorly, the dream is probably, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I've been such a beast. How could I have done that to you? I will now behave perfectly and like the dream person that you've always wanted me to be. Lovely fantasy, not so much reality most of the time. So you need to be prepared for the fact that you can advocate for yourself, and the person to whom you're advocating can say no, can say, I don't like this, can try to gaslight you, can try to retaliate in some way. You're going to have to be ready for that. And by ready, you may need to have a plan. You may need to have, if you think violence could be a possibility, you're going to need to have a plan to protect yourself. You're going to need to have, or maybe you express what you need to express in a public place, whatever it is. You have to think these things through, and you have to accept that negative responses are going to happen. And just because they do, that doesn't mean that you should stop advocating for yourself. Just like you have the right to say, no, I don't want to do that, so do other people. And you have to be okay with that. Next thing. Whoops. Sometimes, for whatever the reason, you can't express it verbally. The person may be dead. The person may be not willing to listen, and it's not worth your time to confront them. You still need to get it out, because part of not advocating for yourself is stuffing your wants and your needs. You're basically just keeping everything boiling under the surface, and you need to let it out. Now, I said earlier, one of the things that I did was I started writing letters to people and just saying, and I also have a journal and I write in there. And that is where I get a lot of things out that I can't express to the people that I need to express them to for whatever the reason. And that's helped a lot, actually, more than I'm actually kind of surprised by how much that has helped, because I didn't realize how much I was sitting on, how much anger and how much hurt and how much sadness I was sitting on, and how that was impacting how I was running my life and what I was doing. So just expressing it, just saying, just advocating for myself in the sense that I'm expressing what I'm feeling and why these things bothered me, or why I'm hurt, or why it's, it annoyed me, or whatever it was. It makes me feel like I matter. And it makes me feel like even if other people don't see that, I see that. I know that I matter. I know that it's important what I feel, and I'm expressing it. So, and getting it out could be writing in a journal. It could be writing a letter to the person involved. It could be getting a pillow and beating on your bed and screaming. It could be, any number of things. It could be writing something and setting it on fire. It could be, whatever works for you. There's no prescribed method for this, but the intent is to release whatever you've been stuffing down, to release whatever it is that you haven't been saying. And some of it may be, some of the stuff that I've been releasing is really, really old stuff that I've been carrying around with me all this time and never acknowledging how much it was weighing me down. So get it out, say it, scream it, sing it, write it, draw it, whatever you need to do. Just get it out there. And what's the interesting thing is, honestly, that some of getting it out there can turn into art, can turn into something that you can share with other people. So don't be afraid of doing that either. I have come to realize that a lot of the reason that I'm not writing as much as I'd like to is because a lot of what I want to write about is stuff that I've been keeping down, and I felt badly about it, or like I shouldn't write about it. And now I'm realizing that it's my stuff and I'm allowed to talk about my stuff, even if it maybe doesn't put other people in the best light. As long as I'm fair and as long as I'm truthful, then I'm allowed. So that's something to think about too. Next thing, stick to the topic at hand. This is a big one. Once you get your courage up, or once you get your willingness to advocate for yourself up, you sometimes want to just do this deluge of these are all the things that you ever did wrong to me, and here's why they hurt me, and I want to talk about all of this. Not going to get you anywhere. Because first of all, most of the time, and I'm not going to say all of the time, but most of the time, the person that you're advocating to is probably not going to apologize for stuff that happened in the past. If they were going to, they would have already. And unless they've gone through a 12-step program and stopped an addiction, or really have had an epiphany of some kind and have realized that their behavior was not working well, they're not going to acknowledge what you're saying. And that's really not the point. Your point is to deal with whatever the topic is in the moment. And a lot of people get sidetracked by this. And like I said, I think a lot of it is because once you learn to advocate for yourself, it's a little bit intoxicating, especially if you've gone for years without doing that. And it becomes kind of almost like a drug where I'm going to tell you everything that ever happened that was horrible, that you did, that hurt me, that made me sad, that made me angry, whatever it was. I'm going to tell you all of this so that you know, because I may not get the courage up to do this again. But really, all that does is basically overshoot the goal because you're shooting a fire hose at it. You don't want to do that. Stick to whatever the particular issue is in the moment. Now, there's nothing wrong with saying, and at a later date or another time, there are other things I'd really like to talk to you about. Nothing wrong with that. But don't try to cover everything at once, because you're just going to end up getting nowhere. Because honestly, a lot of people are big on the past is the past and you should let it go. And I do agree with that to some degree. I think at some point you just have to go, that's gone. I can't. And at some point, honestly, if somebody hurt you 40 years ago and you've carried that around for 40 years, is saying I'm sorry at this point going to make a whole lot of difference? It's a question. I don't know. That's something I'm trying to parse out. But basically, just deal with whatever the thing is in the moment. If you're advocating to not go to a particular restaurant, don't start talking about all the times when you were a teenager that your dad made you go to this restaurant with the creepy waiter or whatever it was. Just say, I don't want to go to this restaurant right now. Pick your battles, basically. And that's like I said, it's a hard thing to do, because if you just started advocating for yourself and you're a little drunk on the power of it, it's really, really tempting to just throw everything out there that bothered you. But that's not going to get you where you need to be. So don't do it. And the last thing, remember you're your own best advocate. Nobody else is going to stand up for you. We like to think that people will. We like to think that people will do that job if we don't. It's a lovely theory. It really, really is. And as someone who's a veteran of a lot of people who were supposed to protect me not protecting me, I can tell you that's not always true. Which means that you have to protect yourself. And hopefully you have to protect yourself in a healthy way, in a way that accomplishes your goal without barring people from your life, without putting you behind 5-foot walls, whatever it is. It's tough. It's tough to advocate for yourself. It's scary to advocate for yourself. There are people who are not going to want you to advocate for yourself. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in this arena. But you're the best person to stand up for you. And if you don't stand up for you, honestly, nobody else is going to stand up for you. Because if you don't stand up for you and your rights and your values and your needs, then basically what you're telling other people is you don't think that's worth it. And I get, especially if you grew up in a situation where you were told that it wasn't, that you weren't worth it, that your needs didn't matter. That may be something that you believe, but you're not right. Your needs matter. Your wants matter. Your feelings matter. And the best one to advocate for all those things is you. And that's really all I have for you guys today. And the voice held up a little better than I thought it would. I'm a little bit astonished, but I can feel that it's starting to try to go. And I don't really want to deal with that. So I am going to say thank you very much, everybody. Hopefully you all got something out of this. If you have any things that you would like me to discuss, or if you're interested in coming as a guest on this show, we used to have guests on this show. I would love to hear your suggestions or to talk with you about coming and being interviewed and having a discussion. Thank you, everybody. I will see you all